Hello, this is the AI Lab. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Emmie Hine. Emmie is a research associate at the Yale Digital Ethics Center and a PhD candidate in law, science and technology at the University of Bologna and KU Leuven. Her research focuses on the ethics and governance of emerging technologies in different geopolitical contexts. The reason? A paper she co-wrote entitled Open Source Foundation Models Made in the EU, Why It Is a Good Idea. Let's hear what Emmie has to say. So, Emmie, compared to the US and China, what strategic advantages does the EU have in developing open source foundation models? And I would like to add, I'm so happy that we do have strategic advantages. It's good to hear.
Yes, I think the EU often gets underestimated when it comes to developing open source foundation models. Right now, if you if you chart model performance, the EU is kind of solidly in the middle. But as DeepSeek showed, leaps are big leaps are very possible, and the EU has a strong foundation for making that possible. So, got access to a lot of multilingual data, which is really great and important for creating multilingual LLMs. There's increased technical infrastructure investment. So these AI factories, the Euro HPC, the High Performance Computing Joint Undertaking, which is establishing AI factories and supercomputing centers all across Europe, including in Bologna, where my PhD is based. And but then I think that the EU's primary advantage is actually in regulatory leadership and trustworthiness. So the AI Act, the GDPR, the forthcoming Code of Practice. This is a great way to provide stability for developers. Right now in the U.S., what a lot of companies are struggling with is the fact that we're kind of a regulatory patchwork. We don't have very much federal legislation, so states are taking the initiative. But when you've got state by state doing their own thing, that creates basically 50 different compliance regimes that companies have to sift through and deal with. The EU just has one, and it's built on a foundation of trustworthiness and European values. And so, as long as that continues, then Europe will have an advantage there. Now, there is this sort of global deregulatory drive that we're seeing in the U.S., and then the AI liability directive is frozen. But if the EU can resist that, then they'll maintain this advantage.
Yeah, I think it's probably more than frozen at this stage. I think it was just deleted from the list. But I see your point on that, and it's good to know that we always thought 27 was a lot, but I guess you have 50 in terms of potential numbers. Um, Now, looking at the EU's regulatory framework and the technical initiatives that you mentioned, how do they contribute, do you think, to the trustworthiness and feasibility of these open source foundation models?
Yeah, so the primary one is, of course, the AI Act, and um, that actually has some carve outs for open source models, but they're still subject to many of the requirements when they're placed on the market. And so its framework of risk based classification and how it encourages ethics by design, I think, is really important for guiding responsible development and deployment of foundation models, and the way that it encourages summaries of training data and things like that is really important. And then you've got the GDPR, which it took a while to figure out exactly how it would apply for model training and data use. I think they've come down now on legitimate interests being sufficient for AI. Of course, copyright is still going to be a big question mark in the U.S. as well as the EU. But I think the EU is taking positive steps towards that. And then you've got just the European focus on collaborative governance. So the AI office is really putting an emphasis on multi-stakeholder collaboration and getting input on the forthcoming general purpose AI code of practice, bringing in civil society and academia and industry. And I think that the code of practice will provide clarity on training data and copyright as well.
Uh, Thank you. I'm not sure the third version of the code of practice was met with enthusiasm. Actually,
Yeah,
I think it was equally met with a lack of enthusiasm by all stakeholders. So maybe that's a sign that it's a good code of conduct.
yeah. Clarity does not always equal enthusiasm, but
Exactly. Now, you don't just state the facts about the what's happening and what's been adopted in the EU. There's also policy recommendations in your paper, and what are those policy recommendations that are aimed specifically to strengthen the governance and the deployment of open source artificial intelligence in the EU?
yeah, so we have six policy recommendations in the paper, and I'll just run through them quickly. The first is establishing an EU-wide open source foundation model governance framework that tailored regulatory guidelines that are aligned with the AI Act and with the GDPR. Ideally, this would mandate transparency around data sources and architectures, testing methodologies, and we think that this would combat open washing, where companies say, "Oh yeah, this is open source," but it's not really. There's a lot of definition. There's a lot of kind of definitions being thrown around about open source, open weight, et cetera, et cetera. But if they're all following a sort of universal governance framework, then that helps get past that issue. And then the second recommendation we make is to develop a certification and a benchmarking system to evaluate open models for security and reliability, ethics and performance. And this, we think, would help boost user trust and also international competitiveness. Because if we know that a model is safe and trustworthy, then and performant, then it's more likely to be adopted. Then the third is to expand dedicated funding programs to encourage open source model development and innovation. So ideally prioritizing SMEs and startups to help them put out more competitive models while encouraging multilingual capabilities and, of course, ethical development. And then the fourth is to scale up AI computing infrastructure. So it's really awesome that Euro HPC and the AI factories are putting more investment in. We'll need more data centers, of course, more compute, and ideally, this investment will ensure that these facilities are going to be energy efficient to help combat the climate impacts of models. It helps that open models, they're not more energy efficient just because they're open, but a lot of the open models that we're seeing do tend to be a little bit more a little bit smaller, a little bit more efficient. And then the fifth is to enhance cross-border and cross-sector collaboration. So fostering partnerships between academia, industry, public entities, and then simplifying some of the administrative process and the just bureaucracy. There's always that is one. Although the EU has many strategic advantages, bureaucracy is perhaps not one of them. But if we can incentivize knowledge sharing and decrease barriers to these partnerships, then that would be wonderful. And then the final recommendation that we make is to launch public awareness and education campaigns just to promote digital literacy around AI in general, but then also especially around open source AI. We hosted a summit on state AI legislation at the Digital Ethics Center recently, and it was great to have stakeholders from government, academia, civil society, but there was definitely a lot of there wasn't sort of a universal understanding of open source technology in general, and then specifically around open source AI and some of the unique ethical and regulatory implications that that it carries. So promoting this kind of digital literacy and developing training programs and resources for responsible AI usage, we think is going to be really, really crucial.
Thank you. I mean, that's a very comprehensive list of recommendations, and as you said, having a common language about what open
Exactly.
source is would be a good thing, and would avoid some of the misconceptions that are maybe around there, both in terms of open washing, as you mentioned, or threats or dangers of something being open, or on the contrary, too much enthusiasm, depending. Thank you for that. I encourage everyone to read the paper you co-wrote with a lot of prestigious other academics, and also to subscribe to your newsletter on LinkedIn, which is a really, really good read that I enjoy very much. Thank you so much, Emmy.
Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate it.